Welcome, everybody, to our third series of Basic Gemara Tools. It's great to see some new people. It's great to see returning people. We're very excited to have you here. As I said, it's our third in the series. It's a project in collaboration, a program run by Hadran in collaboration with Yeshivat Drisha. Rabbanit from Yeshivat Drisha has been teaching the Hebrew. I've been teaching the English. And in addition, if you're looking for more beginners material, there's another course that already exists from last year, the Complete Beginner's Guide to Gemara of Rabbanit Leah Sarna, which is a lecture course rather than this is going to be a Chavruta course, which gives some background information. This course, the goal is not to give the background information, although as we learn, we're going to talk about that kind of the background information as well. The idea here is to jump into the text, delve into Chavruta learning, because the real way to learn Gemara is to get your feet wet with it. And even if you're a complete beginner and you've never learned Gemara before, or you have background and you've learned Gemara before, this course is for you because it can be taught at multiple levels and people will gain different things from it. So if you're the guided sheets that we have are very much geared toward holding your hand during the Chavruta. So if you're learning on your own, if you're learning here on Zoom, if you're learning with people who don't have background, don't worry. If you can't answer a question, move on to the next question, and you'll see whatever you pick up, you will pick up things. And at the end of every class, you'll come out having learned certain things. And I will remind you of new things that we learned today and methodological points to also help you with your learning. Learning Gemara I should just put out there that it's a lifelong process. And we're not going to, in 4 classes, teach you how to open a page of Gemara on your own. But what we're doing in all these courses is building the skills and the building blocks to get you to the next stage so that every year or every course you can advance from one level to the next and always gain new things along the way. And I'm just really excited to be here with you, and we're going to get started. So in terms of the Chavrutot and the breakout rooms, when I finish my introduction, Maggie will explain to all of you who are here on the Zoom how to go into breakout rooms, how that's going to work. In the meantime, we're going to start with the content. So again, the purpose of the course is to give you basic tools and as I said, build up over the years to be every year, gain more skills. What we're learning this year is it's accidental murderer, which is a very interesting topic for many reasons. So first, we'll start with where it's found in the Gemara. It's found in Masechet Makkot. It seems like a strange Masechet to find something about an accidental murderer. Why Makkot? What is Masechet Makkot? Makkot is actually used to be part of Masechet Sanhedrin, and Sanhedrin seems at some point to have been split into 2. There's 10 chapters, which is now Masechet Sanhedrin, and 3 chapters, which is Makkot. And toward the Sanhedrin Masechet Sanhedrin sets up the legal system. The courts starts off with how many people in the courts. Then it moves on to the death penalty. Who gets the death penalty? There's 4 different death penalties. Who gets punished by strangulation? Who gets punished by stoning, etc. And all the sections start off with Eluhen. These are Haniskalim, the ones who get stoned. Eluhen Hanisrafim. These are the ones who get burned. Eluhen, etc. When you get to Masechet Makkot, the first chapter is all about Edim Zomimim. And then the second chapter is Eluhen Hagolim. These are the people that go to exile. Now, exile, we don't mean here when God exiled the Jewish people. Exile, you're going to learn, is a different term used for an Ir Miklat. What is an Ir Miklat? An Ir Miklat is a refuge city. What is a refuge city? It's a place for somebody who accidentally kills somebody and goes to this refuge city. So Eluhen Hagolim is the beginning of our chapter, which is all about who goes to the Ir Miklat. The next chapter is Eluhen Halokim, who gets lashes. So that's why you can see it's a continuum from Masechet Sanhedrin, which is really about who gets all the death penalties, and then it moves into other types of penalties or punishments, which is interesting because it already tells us something about going to a city of refuge that perhaps it's viewed as a punishment. And I say perhaps because that's going to be one of our major questions that we're going to ask today. What is the purpose of going to this refuge city? I want to quote Rabbanit Dreyfus. So when she taught the course in Hebrew, she said something very interesting, which is that Masechet Makkot is really like the Achilles heel, at least the first 2 chapters of Masechet Sanhedrin, which is that it's the rabbi's understanding that sometimes people may abuse the system. So Edim Zomimim was the first chapter, which was all about witnesses coming and testifying falsely, which we obviously know is the problem of the court system, that you might accept witnesses, but what if somebody lies? In our section, what's the Achilles heel? The issue is that it could be you have a murderer who's a real murderer and intentionally murdered someone and runs to the refuge city, because the refuge city not only is punishment, but it also seems to provide protection. Okay, protection from what? We will see. So part of the issue is that you have to figure out who is allowed to stay in this refuge city and who is not allowed to stay in this refuge city. So that's one of the questions that we're going to ask. Now, the other thing I want to discuss is what we're going to do today. We're going to start with the verses in the Torah. Now, this is a Gemara class, so I don't want you to spend too much time. And in fact, I wrote on the study guide, you'll see the sheets are very organized with a lot of questions. And I don't want you to spend very much time, even though there are a lot of verses. The Torah actually spends about, I think I counted 38 verses on this topic in 2 different sections, which is a lot of verses for one topic. And the Torah, I want you to skim through them and try to get a sense. One is in Bamidbar and one is in Dvarim. And there's a bit of a different nature in Bamidbar and in Dvarim. And we want to use that as a bit of a beginning to try to understand what exactly is the purpose of the refuge city and who gets to go to the refuge city. So what we're going to start is with the verses in the Torah. And then we're going to see, as most topics, not all topics, by the way, start in the Torah Shebechtav. Sometimes they really only start in the Gemara. But when you have a topic that starts in the Torah, which is most of our law, you start there and then you see how it changed from the written to the oral and what changed along the way and what developed in the time period that we're going to be dealing with, which is both the Mishnah and the Gemara time period. Right? The Mishnah is the first, and then after that comes the Gemara time period, and we're going to see how things developed and how different people or how the Ir Miklat was viewed. We're going to see that the Ir Miklat serves a number of different purposes, and that's going to be one of the things that we're going to focus on today. The last thing I want to point out when learning a topic like this is to take what you know from our regular world, right? We have a world around us that we live in, and this is a topic that unfortunately comes up quite often, okay? Just to quote a headline from 2 days ago. You might know the case of Alec Baldwin, who shot somebody on a filming. So here's a headline. Listen carefully. Alec Baldwin has been accused of shooting Helena Hutchins with a prop gun after skipping a mandatory firearms safety session and not paying attention in training. Whether this is true or not, I don't know. I don't believe everything I read. But what you see here is the issue immediately is, this is what happens when you don't follow rules and you don't, right? I know my son is a samach mempeh in the army, and he's in charge of the bitichut, of the security, the safety in the, and he tells me all the time, all the issues. And unfortunately, we've seen in the news all sorts of terrible situations, particularly this past year, of soldiers and deaths and accidental. And, where's the line between accidental and where do you get held responsible and where are you not held responsible? And what can be done to prevent these things from happening? These are questions that we deal with on an everyday, on our daily lives, maybe not every day, but on our daily, it happens in our world. And what I want you to do is there's one article I wanted also that I just last time when I was teaching the daf, we found this article that was written by a woman who accidentally killed somebody. And she writes about her struggles. And she basically decided to open a nonprofit. It's an article in the New Yorker. You can look it up. She started an organization called Accidental Impact, which is to provide support for people who accidentally killed somebody. And she said that, she looked around, there were no self-help books. You could find self-help books, she says, on every possible topic in the planet. And there's nothing about this topic. And she basically said, I'm going to go out and I'm going to make support groups for people. And when I read it, I said, wow, it's so interesting to think that the Torah spends so much time talking about this when in our modern day life, when everybody knows that this goes on, very few people are spending their time thinking about this. And with that in your head, I want you to think about, as you're reading these sources, what goes on in the mind of a person who unfortunately ends up in the situation where they accidentally kill somebody, and How do they cope? And does the halacha help them cope? Is that part of the purpose of these refuge cities? What are the purposes of these refuge cities? And try to think about it always with a lens of trying to understand what the Torah was coming to address by creating these refuge cities. What we're going to understand is, number one, there's no clear-cut answers to these questions. Okay, that's the first thing. You learn Gemara before you know that there's no clear-cut answers. Number two, though, you will find that there's multiple answers often to questions. And we're going to learn that the refuge cities actually serve multiple functions. So with that, I'm going to get you started on Chavruta. We have about 40 minutes of Chavruta tonight. We're going to do, different from previous years, we're going to do one big Chavruta and one shiur at the end. And again, I want you, number one, to skim through the verses. Don't spend too much time on them. I want you to get to the Gemaras. There's times to punctuate. There's lots of questions. The questions often, if you don't understand a question, you can move on to the next one. Sometimes you'll find a hint to the answer to the previous one in the next question. So they're built to really be able to let you learn this on your own. I can't promise you're going to get all the answers right. That's fine. You probably won't get all the answers right. And that's actually really okay. But what I'd like you to do is try. Make your best effort to try to get through the sources. You don't have to finish everything. If you spend time on some things and don't get through other things, that's fine. I will review everything at the end of class, after the end of the Chavruta, and we'll go through and there'll be some time, hopefully, at the end for questions and answers. I want to add about the sources, which is everything is translated into English. But if your Hebrew is good, I recommend you try to read it in the Hebrew and use the English when you get stuck. If your Hebrew is not good, you can just use the English, which is fine. But remember that you're reading a translation. So just be aware it might, and the way I translated the Gemara is not, for example, the way the Koren or Sefaria has it with all the extra words. I literally translated word for word as best as I could so that all the help isn't there. So you'll read it and you'll say, this isn't real English, but it's not meant to be real English. It's English words, but written in the way the Gemara is as best as I could to translate them really like an image of the text so that you can get used to punctuating, even if you're punctuating in English. So there's value to all of that. And if your Hebrew is really pretty good and you're comfortable using the text of the actual Gemara without any, and get used to what we call the Tzurat Hadaf, which is the way the Gemara is printed with Rashi on the side and the commentaries. So I recommend you do that. We also have those in PDFs, and just to get used to doing that. If that's too much, that's also fine. Like I said, everyone will get out of this at a different level.